As I brought up earlier in my radar, President Biden's classified report from the intelligence community on the origins of the coronavirus may lead to more questions than answers. If you didn't watch the earlier discussion, the report could not conclude whether the pathogen jumped from an animal to a human as part of a natural process or escaped from a lab in central China. The probe is the result of a 90-day sprint after Biden tasked the intelligence agencies to produce a report that could, quote, bring us closer to a definitive conclusion on the origins of the virus. A few weeks ago, a GOP House probe came to more damning conclusions. Let's hear what the committee's ranking member, Congressman McCall, had to say.
Based on what you've seen, do you think it's more likely than not that the coronavirus emerged naturally or from a lab accident?
You know, I do think it's more likely than not it emerged out of the lab, most likely accidentally, for several reasons. And first of all, Jake, let me say this is the worst cover-up in human history that we've seen, resulting in 3.5 million deaths, creating economic devastation around the globe. As you mentioned, though, it was just declassified that 3 of the researchers were actually hospitalized in November of 2019 with flu-like symptoms consistent with COVID. That was suppressed by the Chinese Communist Party. Since that time in December, they silenced and detained the doctors who were reporting a SARS-like virus, which under international health regulations had to be reported within 24 hours. They went and destroyed lab samples. They wouldn't admit it was human to human, and then working with the WHO failed to report to the world that we had a local epidemic that was now going into a global pandemic.
So we have new Hill-HarrisX data on the matter to share. Let's take a look.
The poll found 56% of voters said they do believe in the GOP House probe's assertion that China and the Chinese Communist Party, or the CCP, engaged in, quote, the greatest cover-up in human history. That includes 72% of Republican voters, half of independents, and 44% of Democrats. Alyssa, were you surprised at the number of Democrats that were willing to say that a Republican committee's rather extreme assertion was probably true?
I think that there's just so much public skepticism around how the Chinese handled this virus from the outset that I'm not surprised to see Democrats coming around to this investigation. And there's a lot of public signs that point to, if nothing else, there was a cover-up by the Chinese, whether it emerged from the lab, whether it leaked out, whether it was supposed to. But we know exactly what they were doing in the early stages of the virus, and they took every step to try to hide information from the public. And I think that just adds to the credibility of, and the belief that they had something to do with this. Kim, your thoughts?
It's really interesting. I mean, it's interesting that it has shifted this much from something that was just absolutely a conspiracy theory, right, from one side to now being, well, a lot of people are really unsure about it. And a lot of people are saying, yeah, it seems like maybe that's more the case. So it's just really, it is interesting to see that shift. And a lot of that has to do with the administration and the tone that they've taken, and the fact that they are probing into this kind of made it more, less political in a way. So pretty interesting. In a recent documentary, the World Health Organization expert who led a controversial joint probe into the origins of the coronavirus pandemic says that Chinese colleagues influenced the presentation of their findings. The WHO expert Peter Ben Embarek said Chinese researchers on the team had pushed back against linking the origins of the pandemic to a research laboratory in Wuhan in a report about the investigation. He said in the interview, quote, "In the beginning, they didn't want anything about the lab in the report because it was impossible. So there was no need to waste time on that." And he goes on to say, quote, "We insisted on including it because it was part of the whole issue about where the virus originated." What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, China did not want that investigated. They took steps to cover it up. It does raise questions about whether we'll ever be able to find out exactly what happened, and it's going to sow doubts about it for sure.
And I think there's the element of the U.S.'s participate. I should say, let me clarify. The fact that the U.S. was funding the lab in Wuhan, not to a significant amount, is about, just under $1 million that we'd contributed, I think also led to some skepticism and some decisions early on to not necessarily pursue that avenue as fully as we could. But I do give credit to the Biden administration for now looking into this. The assessment obviously was inconclusive. But oftentimes intelligence findings they're open to interpretation, and it's a matter of kind of gathering as many facts as they can and then trying to draw a conclusion from there. And as we know, the Chinese obscured this from the outset, so there's much information we would want to have that we just can't get access to at this point, and I don't think ever will.
But weren't there a bunch of international scientists working at that lab, like that weren't Chinese? That they could question and say, hey, what's going on here? I mean, I thought that this was an international institute of, yes, it was based in China, but I thought that there was a lot of international collaboration with it.
And that's where a lot of the criticism of the World Health Organization comes down, because there's a belief that they were just so influenced by the Chinese, their biggest funders, that they didn't explore these origins early on and were basically running cover for the Chinese. So that would explain likely why that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Well, so we'll have to leave it there. Thank you for watching What America's Thinking, and we will see you next time.